Hello, AP World students, and welcome to this video screencast of how to write essays in AP World History. So, a couple notes before we start. I think it would be super helpful for you to take some notes as you watch. Even though you have this video, I think writing it down in your own notes in your own words is going to really help you remember it. And also, please, anytime it asks you to pause and think about something, actually pause and do think about it so that you can get more out of this video than just if you blaze through it in hopes that you're going to remember stuff. So, those are my two points of advice before we start. And let's get going. So, in this class, we're going to look at three types of writings, and you've already been exposed to one of those, and that's the SAQ. And so, everything I've told you about the SAQ, I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Don't forget it, remember it. And when we get SAQs, remember they're going to look very different because your goal is to answer them as short and sweet as possible 3 to 4 sentences, nothing more, and just as quickly as you can get to your answer. The other two types of writings that we're going to look at are a little bit more in depth. So the LEQ, which is what we're going to roll out in this unit, Unit 3, and the DBQ, which we'll roll out in more depth in Unit 4. Both of these follow a different structure than the SAQ. You're actually going to write essays. And so luckily, the format of how you structure your essays is going to be pretty similar between the LEQ and DBQ. You're just going to have to do a few more things with the DBQ. So the notes for today are really going to be catered to the next two style of writings that we're going to have in class. So for today, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to look at the do's and don'ts of writing in an AP class. We'll look at how to write a thesis statement, and we'll look at some samples to see what's a good thesis statement and what's not. We'll look at the types of prompts that they're going to ask you, so you can kind of prepare yourself for the types of essays you would need to write. We'll look at how to structure your essay, so that you, just like we structured our SAQ for the LEQ and DBQ, you want to have a structure in mind for, okay, how do I approach this? Because these are going to be in a time setting, so you want to have, um, a format that you can easily follow and not have to figure out while the clock is ticking. And then finally, I'll show you the rubric on how College Board scores the essays and um, how many points they're out of. So let's start with the do's and don'ts. So first and foremost, don't freak out. Okay. Yes, we're going to be writing essays, but you can do this. All right. Believe in yourself. Anything that we do in class that seems challenging is only challenging from the start. The more you practice it, the more you get used to it, the more you'll feel confident in what you're going to do. So believe in yourself. Feel free to watch this video at any point throughout the year or to reference your notes. The second thing I want to talk about is this is not like a literature essay. You should never write in first or second person for essays in my class. The time for you to do that was on the summer assignment when you were writing your sprite chart. From here on out, any essay, including the SAQ, always needs to be in third person. So I don't want to see words like I, me, you, our, and use a big one, y'all. A lot of people say as you can see. Don't write that. Say as one can see. Okay, put everything in third person. So he, she, they, and anytime you want to use the word you, just swap it out with one. Okay. All right, this is one of the biggest ones that I see frequently. People like to write in present tense. Okay, maybe it's because they do it in other classes, but in history, you got to write in past tense. History is dead. It took place. All right, literature may be alive, but for our class, history is dead. Put everything in past tense because it has finished. It is completed. All right, don't use contractions. That's pretty straightforward. Spell out your contractions. So instead of up top where you see don't on your paper, you would write do not. Okay, it just is more formal, and you're trying to write a formal essay. Don't be vague, y'all. Okay, don't forget your evidence. That's kind of important too. All right, instead use concrete facts and evidence. Don't say, well, a person got power during this time. That's super vague. That could apply to almost any time period in world history. Instead, who was that person? How did they gain power? Where did they gain power? Things like that are going to help improve your essay. Right after the evidence, don't imply the reasoning. Instead, explain your reasoning. So just and high school students do this quite frequently. Just like the girl in the "My Dad's a Space Alien" Audi ad, a lot of students give evidence and then just assume that it's self-explanatory. Well, in essay writing, it's never self-explanatory. You have to explain it like the reader doesn't know what you're talking about. So always make sure when you give a piece of evidence, you explain why it supports your argument. The why is crucial. And then finally, this is one that may not apply to you, but some students do this, and I want to encourage you not to. Try not to use all or nothing language. Don't say all civilizations during the time were like this, or there were no other civilizations, or there were no other empires that fit this criteria. And the reason why I encourage you not to use that, unless you're 100% positive, but the reason I encourage you not to do that is because it's so easy to disprove. All I need to do is find one civilization that doesn't meet your statement, and your statement is now wrong. So instead, use other words like many, often, rarely, or few. So many other civilizations during the time. That's not vague, right? You can expand on which civilizations, but it allows yourself a little bit of wiggle room. If I'm a reader and I go, oh, how about uh, this one exception to the rule? So just be careful with that. All right. So the first step when you write an essay, you gotta have a good thesis. I can usually tell after teaching AP courses for over 7 years now, I can usually tell that if a thesis is not good, the rest of the paper is going to struggle. So we're going to spend some time working on how to write a thesis, and we're going to spend some time in class writing theses. So please, 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 if you need to take more time after you understand the prompt towards anything else, it's writing a good thesis. All right, so what is a thesis? A thesis is a statement um, that's going to serve as your position on the prompt. Okay, it's the position you're going to take. It's the argument that you're going to make towards the question being asked. All right, so which part of CER might that be like? If you said claim, you're right. This is your claim for your essay. So your paper is going to have a main point or a central message, right? Your main argument to a prompt. The arguments you make in your paper should reflect that main idea. Okay, you shouldn't ever use evidence or reasoning if it doesn't help explain your point. Okay, the sentences that capture your position on this main idea, all right, at the very beginning is your thesis statement. Okay, so again, the thesis is what you plan to argue and really how you plan to argue it. But don't worry, I've got a little formula for you to help you out. So how do we write a thesis statement? Okay, if a thesis statement equals your stance and your main arguments, okay, we're going to come and we're going to have a formula for how to do this. But before we do that, all right, take a second, pause, think about thesis statement is your stance. We said that's a claim. So what would your main arguments be? Would it be your claim, your evidence, or your reasoning? Pause and then come back. All right, welcome back. If you said that your main arguments are your reasons, you are correct. We're going to save the concrete evidence for later on in the paper. So your thesis is really going to have a claim, and it's going to be supported by some big reasons for why your claim is right. So your thesis then serves as ammo for your paper. And I know ammo is spelled AMMO, but this is an acronym. And of course, it's a cringeworthy acronym. So yes. Let's talk about what ammo means. All right, ammo stands for answer the freaking question. There we go, back to ATFQ. Of course, you got to be able to answer the freaking question. The M is to make a stand or a claim. Every essay prompt is going to ask for you to really make a claim that could be argued, right? If you make a claim that's not arguable, then you haven't really made a claim, right? And we'll look at that when we do some examples in a minute. And finally, outline your major arguments. Okay, and your major arguments, your reasons for why your claim is true. That's what you're going to put in your thesis. Okay, so your thesis is going to answer the freaking question. You're going to make a stand, and then you're going to outline your major arguments. All right, so let's take a look. Oh, before we do that, two things. Number one, there's two ways you can write your thesis. You can state your claim and back it up with at least two major arguments. That is a basic level thesis statement. It's acceptable by College Board. But you can take it one step further and make it even better and even more complex, which is to state your claim, to back your claim up with at least two major arguments, but then to build in a counterclaim, right, with an argument to support it. All right, so it shows that you're not just looking at from one perspective, but you're considering alternatives to that perspective. Okay, and that shows complexity. And so that's uh, to start, I'm okay with you doing A. By the end of the year, I want you guys really working on getting to B. So let's look at some samples, all right? Let's pretend for a second, again, you guys know I like to model stuff here. Let's pretend this is your essay prompt. To what extent are weekends necessary for teenagers? Yeah, why don't we go to school for 7 days a week? I'm sure y'all would love that idea. Not really. Okay, so here's our model. To what extent are weekends necessary for teenagers? So on the next few slides, I'm going to give you a thesis statement. You're going to pause it, and when you pause it, you're going to answer these three questions. Is this a bad, fair, or good thesis statement? Okay, how do we judge it? We look back at ammo. Does it answer the freaking question? Does it make a claim? Can I argue against it? And does it outline reasons for why that claim is true? Right, those reasons are going to be the outline for our paper. So after you do that, figure out B, what makes it bad, fair, or good, and then C, what if anything could make it better. So here comes your first one. Sample thesis. Weekends are good for teenagers for a variety of reasons. Take a second, pause, answer A, B, and C, and then once you've answered them, come back and we'll go over the answer. All right, welcome back. This is a bad thesis statement, y'all. Weekends are good for teenagers for a variety of reasons. Holy smokes, that's super vague. I have no clue what you'd be writing about other than a variety of reasons, which really to me is not very concrete. Also, it doesn't really take a strong stand. I mean, it says they're good, but it's so vague. I have no clue what it's doing. So it's bad because it's vague, and there's really no reasons attached to it. So how could we make it better? Well, let's put some reasons in there. And in addition, maybe include a counterclaim, maybe a reason that weekends are not good for teenagers. All right, so let's look at another sample thesis statement. Weekends are a 2-day break for teenagers. Pause, answer A, B, and C, and then come back. All right, welcome back. If you said this was a bad thesis statement, you are correct. Weekends are a 2-day break for teenagers. That is what we call a fact. That is not a thesis statement. You can't really argue that. Maybe on some weekends you get 3, or maybe for a long break you get more than that. But for the most part, throughout the year, weekends are a 2-day break for teenagers is a statement. Okay, what makes it bad is that it doesn't make a claim and it doesn't outline the paper. So it's missing the M and the O, right? And I'd argue it probably is also missing the A there. It's not really answering the freaking question. It's just stating a fact. What can make it better? Doing all parts of ammo would make this significantly better. Make a stand. Outline your paper with arguments that support that stand, and make sure you're answering the question. All right, let's look at a third one. Weekends are important for teenagers for intellectual and social reasons. Let's pause, answer A, B, and C, and let's see. All right, welcome back. Weekends are important for teenagers for intellectual and social reasons. All right, this is a fair thesis statement, okay? It does answer the questions to what extent. It says it is important. It makes that claim, and then it gives 2 arguments and 2 reasons for why that claim is true for intellectual and social reasons. Now, that's what makes it semi-fair, right? What could make it better is if we actually laid out what those intellectual and social reasons are. But wait, Mr. Curtis, If we do that, we'll have nothing to write about in our paper. Wrong. Remember, we haven't put any evidence in here yet. So you're going to put your 2 reasons, spell out what those are, and then you have an entire paragraph to support it with evidence. Okay? So let's look at another. We got 2 more. Let's look at our second to last one. Weekends are necessary for teenagers because they allow teenagers to regain sleep, interact with peers, and work extended part-time hours. Pause, answer A, B, and C, and come back when you're ready. All right, welcome back. If you said this was a good thesis statement, you are correct. All right, weekends are necessary for teenagers. So A, they're taking a stand that to what extent is it necessary? It is necessary for teenagers. And then they allow teenagers to regain sleep. It allows them to interact with peers and work extended part-time hours. All 3 of these are reasons that support their claim that it is necessary. And they're not super vague, right? But also notice they didn't put anything super concrete as evidence in there. They didn't say allow teenagers to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep because that's super important for them during their years, growing. No, they said that allow teenagers to regain sleep, and then when we write paragraphs in the future, we can actually use that those statistics to help support that. Now, what could make this better? Think about that for a second. Well, if you said that having a counterclaim in there would make it better, that would be correct. All right, this is a decent thesis statement. It's definitely acceptable. If you go back to that slide where you have an A and a B way to write a thesis statement, this is the A. This is what I want you guys to be able to start off doing. All right. Putting in that counterclaim would really get it to the complex thesis statement. All right, so let's look at our last sample thesis statement. All right, although the typical weekday academically stimulates a teenager's brain, weekends are even more crucial to the average teenager. Weekends help teens regain needed sleep, allow time and space for peer-to-peer interaction, and enable work-based opportunities outside the classroom. Pause, go through A, B, and C, and come back. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you realize that this hits all parts of AMO and it includes a counterclaim. So this is all the way down there. And this is a great thesis statement. Okay. Now, can a thesis statement be more than 1 sentence? Of course, right? This is a 2-sentence thesis statement. Okay. Do we have a stand? Yes. Weekends are more crucial than the weekday for teenagers. Okay. But they have their counterclaim. Although the typical weekday academically stimulates a teenager's brain, so they're making an argument for why weekdays are important, then they lay down the claim that weekends are even more crucial. Okay, then they say why. Weekends help teenagers regain sleep. That's 1 argument. They allow time and space for peer-to-peer interaction. That's 2. And they enable work-based opportunities outside the classroom. That's 3. If this were to become, if this were to be actualized into an essay, this would be a 6-paragraph essay, and I'll tell you how. You have your intro and conclusion, so that's 2 of those paragraphs. You have point 1, which would be 1 paragraph on how weekends help teens regain needed sleep. You'd have another paragraph on allowing time and space for peer-to-peer interaction, and you'd have a 3rd paragraph on enabling work-based opportunities outside the classroom. All 3 of those support your argument. But you would also need to take 1 paragraph to explain the counterclaim, although the typical weekday academically stimulates a teenager's brain, right? So talking about giving some evidence and reasoning for why the weekday is also important, all right? So hopefully you did well on those. If you didn't, maybe go back and look at them again, and if you have any questions, you can always email me. But let's take all that information and let's look at what the LEQ is, all right? So the LEQ stands for a long essay question. You are going to get a prompt, and that is it. You get a prompt, and you got to write an essay based on the prompt, all right? So you're going to have to respond to that prompt by making a claim. Again, we're going to see all of this when you see your claim and your reason in your thesis statement. You're going to back up that claim in your body paragraphs with evidence, and you're going to explain in each paragraph why that evidence justifies the claim. And the topic sentence of each paragraph is going to be one of those reasons that you put in your thesis that support that overall claim, that overall argument. Okay? Usually, your total number of paragraphs is going to be at least 4. You have your intro and conclusion and at least 2 paragraphs that support your claim. But oftentimes you'll find 3, and especially if you're going to do complex, you can't just have one reason in favor of your argument and one reason against it, because then it doesn't really have the weight of why your argument is correct. You want to have at least 2 to support yours and maybe 1 counter claim. All right. So when we write, y'all, all those acronyms that are on my wall, ATFQ, CER, AMO, contextualization, well, that's not an acronym, but the other 3, a lot of those, we're going to see elements of those in our essay. We've got to answer the question, the prompt. We got to CER in each paragraph. We're going to ammo our thesis, right? And then we're going to put that contextualization in there as well. All right, so what are the 3 different types of prompts you're going to get? Okay, any prompt that you are going to get is going to be a causation prompt, a comparison prompt, or a continuity and change prompt. So causation is what led something to take place, right? A comparison is going to ask you to compare 2 places. Not 2 places, 2 things, right? What's similar and what's different. How do you make an argument out of that? Well, you might say that they were more similar than they were different, or they were more different than they were similar. And a beautiful thing about that is your complexity can talk about they were more similar than they were different, but here's one way in which they were still different. Okay? And then finally, continuities and change, what has stayed the same and what has changed. Again, building an argument off of that is that there were more continuities than there were changes, or there were more changes than continuities. Again, continuities are things that are staying the same, and changes are obviously things that are not. So, how do we structure our essay? With EssayBot. I don't have a name for him, so help me think of one. But this is EssayBot, okay? And it's a little graphic organizer to help you realize how you write your essay. Okay, and we're going to go from the top to the bottom. So I would encourage you maybe to draw this out on your own. It doesn't have to be fancy, but I think it'll be helpful for you to write it out. Again, that's a little muscle memory for you. So the first thing you're going to do is give that contextualization. Remember the Star Wars scroll coming up? Before you even write your argument, let's put it into context. What's happening out there in the world? What led us up to this point? Super important. Okay, you can't just jump into here's your argument. Let's put a little context down first. Then you're going to give your thesis. Okay, that's the only 2 things that you really need to have in your introductory paragraph. But Mr. Curtis, I want to write a really, really lengthy one. Okay, don't, right? Your contextualization, that's all you need to put some time and energy into as far as length in your intro. Okay, your thesis, I want you to put time and energy into, but it doesn't have to be long. It can be, 2 or 3 sentences. It could even be 1 sentence. All right. So that's what you're going to do in your opening paragraph. So this triangle represents your opening paragraph. Okay, your body paragraphs. This is the body of EssayBot here. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to take the arguments that you put in your thesis. So weekends are necessary for teenagers because A, they allow this, B, they allow that, C, they allow that, and A, B, and C are going to become your body paragraphs. So claim, right, your outline number 1 in your thesis. That's going to become your topic sentence. Y'all, I should be able to look at your topic sentence and relate it back to your thesis. Okay? It should be pretty obvious, right? One reason that weekends are super important for teenagers is that they allow time for peer-to-peer interaction. That's your topic sentence. Okay? Then give evidence to support that and make sure there's reasoning, right? So why not? Don't just put that the students get more sleep on the weekends. Explain why that's important. And then finally, you're going to link, all right? So restate the main points, right? And linking it back to your thesis, okay? So again, this comes back to our thesis. Each paragraph relates to our thesis. If you're writing a paragraph that doesn't relate to your thesis, either you're wasting your time writing the paragraph or your thesis is not that good. So we're going to work on that. When you're done with paragraph 1, you're going to go to paragraph 2. Same format. Make a claim. right, with the second part of your outline in your thesis, right, your second argument. You're going to give supporting evidence, reasoning for the evidence, and then you're going to restate the main points and link it back to that thesis. All right, I know it's going to come as a shock to you, but paragraph number 3 is going to do the same thing. All right, but this might be where you give your counterclaim. Okay, now I would always encourage you to put your counterclaim third. Okay, because if you run out of time, you still have supported your overall idea and your main argument with these two. And if you ran out of time and you didn't get here, it's still going to be okay. Right? So, same deal, counterclaim, evidence, reasoning, link it back to your thesis. Okay? Each topic sentence I should see as part of your thesis. Once you've done that, then you got to figure out a way to conclude, and that's where this last triangle comes in. So, to conclude, you're going to restate your thesis. Y'all, this is super important. Don't just write the thesis all over again, but try to find another way for you to write the thesis. Okay, maybe rearrange the structure of it or reword some of the words. And here's why I say that. When I'm grading your essays, I look at your thesis. If it is not good here, I don't read any of your body paragraph. I come straight down to where you restated your thesis. Because sometimes what happens is students write a thesis or they're writing it while they're simultaneously trying to figure it out. Then, as they're writing, they feel more confident. And then when they restate it, it's actually better sometimes. So always take the opportunity to do that because it could totally help you. If your thesis is horrible here, but it's great here, you still get a thesis point. So yay. And then finally, some sort of way to conclude your paper, to kind of wrap it all up. If you want to try to bring it back to contextualization and give some more context here, you could do that as well. So, the last thing we're going to go over, the rubric. Okay, you're going to be assessed on these 4 categories. So, thesis, we've talked about. Contextualization, we've talked about. Evidence, we've talked about. And guess what? Analysis and reasoning, we have talked about throughout the course of this year in AP World History. But let's break it down. You get 1 point for your thesis. Y'all, you either get the point or you don't. There's no half points on this rubric. All right? So make sure it does ammo, and then you'll be in good shape. Contextualization, you get 1 point for. Okay? Now, it's got to be specific enough that you've truly set the stage. It cannot be a drive-by fact, right? The Star Wars scroll wasn't 1 sentence. Okay? It doesn't need to be 4 paragraphs like Star Wars, but it's got to be a good, healthy 4 or 5 sentences that sets the stage. Okay? It cannot be, at this time, Islam was rising. And here's my thesis statement. That is not contextualization. That's what I call the drive-by fact. Okay? Can't do that. Your evidence, y'all, you get 2 points for it. The first point is if you provide specific and relevant examples. Okay? So as long as your examples are related to the topic of the prompt, you're in good shape. Okay? Now, just like with contextualization, you cannot do a drive-by fact. Okay? You have to establish that you know what this fact is all about. Like, you have to explain what the evidence is. You can't just drive by. Okay? You can't, again, if we're doing the girl who's claiming her dad's a space alien, she can't just say, he drinks weird stuff, right? She's got to say, he drinks green stuff in the morning before he goes to work, okay? And then later on, do the reasoning of why that makes him an alien. The second point is for using those examples to help build an argument. So if your thesis statement is not great and you have totally missed the topic of the prompt or how to answer the prompt, you can still get this first point by giving specific and relevant examples. However, you can't get the second point unless you're using them to build an argument that relates to your thesis. So that's going to kind of pair with your reasoning. So make sure you don't, ignore that part of it. So make sure your evidence is helping to build your argument throughout. And then finally is the analysis and reasoning, which is another 2 points. So the first point is using the historical reasoning to build an argument. So remember we said you're going to get a prompt that's causation, comparison, or changing continuity over time. Well, as long as you are explaining in each paragraph how that evidence shows causation, shows comparison or similarity or difference, and or shows continuity and change over time, you can get that first point. Now, the second point is one of the most challenging points on this rubric. Okay, and the reason why is because you have to show a complex understanding throughout your entire paper. So if you set yourself up with a counterclaim, that's a great start. Okay, but you have to show complex understanding throughout. So showing some nuances, even perhaps in your body paragraphs. Okay, maybe you're saying that that these two empires were more similar than they were different, right? Maybe acknowledging some nuances in their similarities and then focusing on a really big difference. Okay, that would show complexity throughout. Okay, so all in all, y'all, the rubric adds up to 6 points. Okay, the DBQ has one more point attached to it, but we're going to discuss that later. But for the LEQ, you're going to get 6 points. Okay, um, just like your SAQs, these will be weighted and they'll be curved initially, and then slowly the curve will be removed. And we'll talk about what that looks like more in class. So that's the end of our video. Hopefully you learned some new things. Hopefully you'll be ready for a cough, cough, hint, hint, wink, wink, something in the near future. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thanks.